The heavy glass door sighed shut behind me. A mournful sound, immediately devoured by the predatory silence of St. Jude's terminal. It wasn't just quiet, it was a void, a crushing absence of sound that made my own pulse hammer uncomfortably loud in my ears. The chill hit me next, damp and penetrating, colder than the March night outside warranted. It smelled wrong. Wet concrete, the sharp tang of ozone like before a lightning strike, and something else. A faint, sickly, sweet undertone, like rotting fruit mixed with old iron. It reminded me, nauseatingly, of the abandoned factory back home. The one where, no, don't think about that. Why was I here? Debt was the simple answer, the easy headline. Mountains of it, threatening to bury me, but beneath that was the real reason. The ugly truth I couldn't outrun. The wreckage I'd made, the trust I'd shattered, the desperate need to disappear somewhere no one would look for me. This job posting, found in a rain-soaked flyer in a town I was just passing through, felt less like an opportunity and more like penance. A graveyard shift in a place forgotten by time. Maybe isolation was what I deserved. The interview had been a joke. Henderson, the man hiring me, looked like he carried the weight of the station in the frantic animal trap of his eyes. He'd met me miles away, chain-smoking in a greasy diner booth, practically vibrating with nervous energy. He barely glanced at my fabricated resume, just shoved the keys and a folded, grease-stained piece of paper across the table. The rules, he rasped, his voice like sandpaper. Don't ask questions, don't get clever. Just follow the damn rules if you want to see morning, he'd added, leaning closer, his breath smelling stale and fearful. It ain't just things you might see, kid. It's the quiet, the place. It gets in your head. Then he'd bolted, leaving me with the keys and a chilling premonition, standing now in the echoing vault of the main hall. Under the sickly hum and flicker of dying fluorescent tubes that cast shadows like grasping fingers, premonition hardened into dread. The sheer scale of the place was oppressive, the silence vast and judging. It felt like being watched, not by eyes, but by the building itself. Every scuff of my worn boots on the grimy floor seemed obscenely loud, an intrusion. Was this what true isolation felt like? Or was it something else? Something waiting in the silence. The ticket booth was a dark little box tucked into an alcove, looking abandoned for decades. Scratched plexiglass, a dented counter filled with something more than dust, a greasy, almost organic residue. I slid the shutter open with a screech that echoed unnervingly. Inside, the air was even colder, the metallic, coppery tang sharper. A single bare bulb hummed, casting weak light. It felt less like an office and more like a cage. Or maybe a confessional. And there it was, taped securely to the inside of the counter, the paper Henderson gave me. Stained, yes, but the dark marks looked less like grease now and more like something dried. Old blood. The handwriting was jagged, sharp, dug into the paper. Rules for the night shift. St. Jude's terminal. My breath caught. I traced the first line with a trembling finger. If a passenger has no face, issue no ticket. They already have a way in. No face. The words conjured a sickening image, a facelessness that felt horribly familiar, like looking in the mirror after ruining everything back home. A loss of identity, a void where a person should be. I swallowed, the metallic taste suddenly strong on my tongue. A draft unnaturally cold snaked around my ankles from the direction of the platform tunnels. If someone boards the train walking backwards, do not make eye contact. Unnatural. Wrong. 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 Things not moving the way they should. My old man used to say some things in the world just aren't meant to be looked at straight on. Superstitious nonsense, I thought then. Now, staring at the rule, a primal fear of the fundamentally incorrect stirred in my gut. A low groan echoed from deep within the station's structure, like stressed metal or stone. If a passenger asks, "Do you remember me?" but you've never seen them, Lie and say yes. If you don't, you'll soon learn where you met. This sent a jolt straight through me, cold and sharp. Remember me. There were faces I desperately wanted to forget. Conversations I replayed endlessly. Accusations I couldn't answer. The idea of being confronted, forced to acknowledge a past, real or fabricated, by something here. It felt personal, targeted. You'll soon learn where you met. What did that mean? Being dragged into their world? Or forced to relive my own worst moments? The paper felt ice cold beneath my fingertips. I sank onto the hard, rickety stool, the rules seeming to burn themselves onto the inside of my eyelids. The vast, oppressive silence of St. Jude's pressed in, no longer just empty, but filled with a terrible waiting potential. The flickering lights buzzed. Erratic heartbeats in the gloom. Each shadow seemed deeper. The distant sounds more deliberate. This wasn't just a job. It wasn't just isolation. It felt like a sentence, and my judgment had only just begun. The first train, the Midnight Concord, was still hours away. But I had the sickening feeling that the passengers had already started arriving. The silence in St. Jude's wasn't just deep. It was digestive. It swallowed sound, time, maybe even sanity. The minutes after reading the rules bled together, marked only by the erratic flicker of the lights overhead and the frantic pulse beating a frantic tattoo against my ribs. I sat hunched in the cold booth, the stained paper clutched in my hand, each rule a venomous little seed planting itself in my mind. No face. Backwards. Remember me. It felt less like a warning and more like a prophecy of the horrors this night held in store. Was this my punishment then? Sentenced to face impossible things in this forgotten place? Payback for the life I derailed? The trust I'd incinerated? The chime of the entrance door was a physical blow. I flinched, dropping the paper. A couple looking gray and exhausted shuffled in. They moved like ghosts already, their eyes sliding past me, fixated on the oppressive emptiness. They bought 2 tickets for the Concord. The man paying with coins so cold, they burned my palm, leaving numb spots where they'd touched. They reminded me of Sarah's parents after I told them. That same hollowed-out look. The man dropped a ticket, fumbled for it, and just for a second, his hand looked skeletal, translucent under the flickering light. I blinked hard, the image vanishing. Just tricks of the light. Stress. Had to be. They retreated wordlessly to a bench. 2 small islands in an ocean of decaying grandeur. Their defeated normality somehow made the station feel even more threatening. Time dripped like slow-leaking rust. 20 minutes? An hour? The station seemed to exist outside the normal flow. Then, another arrival. No chime this time. I looked up from tracing the grain of the counter, and she was just there, approaching. The tall, thin woman in the dark dress. She moved with a silence that was utterly wrong, gliding over the tiles. Her dull, perfect face, the 2 wide eyes, the smile stretched too tight. It screamed imitation. A poorly made mask hiding. What? 1 ticket, she hummed, that low, resonant vibration filling the booth again. The PA system crackled, a sound like tearing fabric. And the smell, lilies, sickly sweet, overpowering. Funerals. It brought back a sharp, unwelcome memory. Aunt Carol's closed casket. That same suffocating scent filling a cramped church. I pushed the memory down, hard. Sure, I croaked. Her money felt like preserved ice, stiff, dry, leaching warmth. Her eyes, wide and black, fixed on mine. As I slid the ticket across, her long, pale fingers deliberately brushed against mine. The cold was shocking, absolute. It wasn't just temperature. It felt like absence, and with the touch came a fleeting, alien sensation. Not a memory, but the feeling of immense, desolate loneliness, vast and empty as the station itself. I snatched my hand back, as if burned. Her smile widened, showing the barest glimpse of teeth that seemed too pointed. "Pleasant journey," I mumbled, the words mechanical. She held my gaze a second longer, an eternity of cold scrutiny, then turned and glided towards platform 3. On the monitor, I watched her reach the archway. No pause this time. She simply flowed into the darkness beneath it and was gone. The monitor didn't even flicker. My hands were shaking badly now. The cold from her touch lingered on my skin. The lingering scent of lilies felt like a shroud. I felt contaminated. I stumbled out of the booth, needing air, space. I half ran to where she vanished. The air was colder here, the coppery tang sharp, and there it was again, the small, smooth, gray stone on the dusty floor. This time, drawn by a morbid curiosity I couldn't explain, I picked it up. It was heavy, dense as lead, and radiated that same deep, unnatural cold as her fingers. It felt fundamentally wrong. I pocketed it without thinking, the cold seeping through my jeans. Back in the booth, the paranoia was a physical claw tightening in my gut. I found the fresh tally marks under the counter again. Still 3, or had there been 4 before? Was my memory already fraying? I tried the dead phone again. Nothing. I was completely alone here, trapped with whatever these things were. That's when the real sound began. Not the train whistle, not yet. It started as a faint, rhythmic scraping from the main entrance. The sound of rough material dragging unevenly across stone. It grew steadily louder, joined by the distinct, halting slide of heavy shoes that didn't lift properly, and woven through it, a soft, wet, guttural sighing, like breath drawn through water or thick mucus. Rule 2. If someone boards the train walking backwards, do not make eye contact. My muscles locked. Every instinct screamed to look, to identify the threat. But Henderson's panicked eyes, the frantic scrawl on the paper, "Don't look." The sliding footsteps, the scraping drag, the wet sighing, closer now, laborious, unnatural, coming right for the booth. I could almost picture it. Something shambling, moving against the natural flow of motion, dragging some unseen burden. Was it facing away? Was that why I shouldn't look? What would I see if I did? A memory flashed. Turning back on a dark road. The consequences. I slammed the brakes on the thought, forcing my eyes down, focusing intently on the grain of the wooden counter until the lines blurred. The temperature inside the booth crashed. Frost exploded across the plexiglass, thick and white like freezer burn, instantly blinding me to the hall outside. My breath became a thick cloud. The cold was absolute, biting, painful. The sounds stopped. Right outside, inches away. Inches away. The silence screamed. The pressure against the booth was immense, a physical weight. I could feel its presence, cold and vast and fundamentally wrong. Then, the wet sigh, louder, closer, right against the frosted glass, followed by a slow, deliberate tap. Tap, tap on the plexiglass like something hard. Bone, rapping for attention. My heart felt like it was trying to batter its way out of my chest. Bile rose in my throat. Don't look. Don't look. I squeezed my eyes shut, picturing the tally marks, the grain of the wood. Anything but the source of that tapping, that awful breathing. How long did it wait? An eternity. Each second stretched thin and brittle. I could hear my own blood roaring in my ears. Was it trying to see in? Did the frost hide me? The tapping stopped. The intense pressure lessened almost imperceptibly. Then slowly, agonizingly, sounds resumed. The halting slide, the wet sigh, the scraping drag, moving away, fainter, heading towards the platforms, leaving behind only the suffocating silence. The biting cold, and the lingering ghost of that awful breath. I stayed frozen for what felt like hours, listening until the last echo faded, until the frost began to slowly retreat from the glass, leaving distorted trails of moisture. My whole body shook uncontrollably. Finally, risking a glance at the monitor for the main hall, I saw nothing. Just the empty, flickering space. It was gone. Rule 2 survived. But the cost was a gnawing terror that felt like it had burrowed under my skin. The station groaned again. A deep, structural agony. The lights flickered violently, and the PA system crackled. A voice, distorted, layered, like many voices speaking at once, whispered, "Almost time, Alex. Almost time." My head snapped up. More sounds. A low, resonant hum, almost subsonic, vibrating through the floor, making the loose change on the counter dance. The air pressure shifted abruptly, making my ears pop painfully, and from the main entrance, emerging silently from the deepest shadows, came another figure. It coalesced rather than walked. A shape resolving out of the gloom. Humanoid, draped in heavy, dark cloth that seemed to drink the light. It moved with utter silence, gliding towards my booth. My stomach plummeted. No footsteps, no breath sounds, just a low hum and the pressure change. It stopped 6 feet away, and I saw it. Rule 1, where a face should have been. There was only a smooth, seamless, pearly white blankness. No features, no contours. Just an obscene void that defied geometry, that made my eyes water and my brain recoil. It felt like staring into primordial emptiness, into the sheer wrongness at the heart of things. It raised a hand, long, pale, unsettlingly normal, and gestured towards the ticket slot. The silent request, "No ticket." They already have a way in. The rule felt less like an instruction, and more like a statement of horrifying fact. Panic warred with a strange, morbid paralysis. I shook my head mutely, pressing back against the booth wall, unable to tear my eyes away from that horrifying blankness. An immense pressure radiated from it, cold and vast. Not malice, not anger, just immense, indifferent weight. Why? The humming intensified. A physical vibration in my bones, in my teeth. It held the gesture, waiting. The blank expanse seemed to watch me, despite having no eyes. Did it understand refusal? Did it care? Slowly, infinitely slowly, it lowered its hand. It turned, the dark cloth swirling like ink in water, and glided soundlessly towards the platform 3 archway. It didn't seem to interact with the floor, just moved. As it reached the arch, the darkness within seemed to pulse, to deepen, and the entity merged with it, dissolving into the absolute blackness without a trace. The humming stopped. The pressure vanished. The light steadied slightly. I was left gasping, slick with cold sweat. The image of that blank face burned into my retinas. The sharp, coppery smell, like ozone and old blood, surged, stronger than ever, seeming to emanate from the direction the entity had gone. My legs gave out. I slid down the wall onto the floor of the booth, shaking, head spinning. 2 rules tested and survived. 1 more, the worst one, still waiting. And the train was coming. I could feel it now. A deeper vibration in the earth, a growing anticipation in the very air of the station. How much more could I take before I broke? Before I became just another set of tally marks under the counter? "Alex." The whisper slithered through the booth again, coiling in the freezing air right beside my ear. I scrambled up from the floor, heart spasming, eyes darting frantically around the tiny, grimy space. Nothing. Nothing. Just the humming bulb casting weak light on the stained walls. The lingering smell of ozone and old blood. Thicker now, almost choking. The whisper hadn't come from the pod this time. It felt like it had originated from the shadows themselves, from the oppressive weight of the station's silence. I wasn't alone. The knowledge was absolute, chilling me deeper than the unnatural cold. Leaning heavily against the counter, I fought for breath. The image of the faceless entity, that smooth, featureless void, was seared behind my eyelids. My stomach roiled. How long could anyone endure this? How long before this place stripped away everything, leaving just a hollow shell? Another set of tally marks. Was that the point? Was this station a grinder, chewing up lost souls like me? The thought brought a surge of defiant anger, quickly swamped by overwhelming fear. The station seemed to pulse around me, a malevolent organism aware of my terror. The lights flickered in sync with a low, guttural groan that vibrated up from the floor. The sound of immense weight shifting somewhere below. A patch of dampness on the far wall seemed to darken, spreading like a bruise. Was I hallucinating again? Or was the decay accelerating, feeding on my fear? I felt trapped not just in the booth, but within my own unraveling mind. Was this the price for running? For the mistakes I couldn't undo? My eyes fell on the gray stone I'd pocketed earlier. The one left where the woman who smelled of lilies had vanished. I had pulled it out. It was smooth, featureless, and still radiated that profound, unnatural cold. Holding it felt wrong, like holding a piece of solidified dread. What was its purpose? A marker? A token? A key? I shoved it back in my pocket, the cold a small, solid anchor in the swirling chaos of my thoughts. Then stillness. The groaning stopped. The light steadied slightly. Even the coppery smell seemed to recede. A different kind of silence fell, heavy with anticipation. I knew, instinctively, this wasn't calm. This was the pause before the strike. My gaze flickered to the monitors, scanning the empty hall, the shadowed platforms. Nothing moved. Until something did. Not from the entrance this time, nor the platforms. From the darkened corridor leading towards the station master's office. The same corridor the shuffling, blank-eyed man had emerged from earlier. A figure stepped out of the shadows, moving with quiet confidence. Middle-aged, wearing a damp-looking trench coat, carrying an old briefcase. Deceptively normal. My skin crawled. I knew, somehow, this was the next one. He walked directly towards the booth, his footsteps making almost no sound on the tiles. He stopped in front of the plexiglass, his pale blue eyes locking onto mine. There was no overt menace in his gaze, just an unnerving ancient weariness mixed with intense focus. He looked through me. He leaned forward slightly, his breath misting the glass. "Alex," he said, his voice quiet, resonant, strangely familiar, though I'd never heard it before. "It's good to see you again. It's been too long." Ice water replaced the blood in my veins. Rule 3. The final test. My throat constricted. The memory of the frantic warning on the paper. Lie and say yes. If you don't, you'll soon learn where you met. Worried with every instinct screaming at me to deny this impossible recognition, this violation. What would happen? What forgotten circle of hell would I be dragged into if I refused? My own personal hell, the one I carried inside me every day. His pale eyes held mine, patient, unwavering. He knew the struggle. He could see the terror warring with the desperate need to survive. My mouth was sandpaper. I needed to speak, needed to make the lie convincing. My past mistakes, the faces of those I'd hurt, flashed behind my eyes. Maybe this was part of the judgment. I forced a nod, a stiff, jerky movement that felt like pulling strings on a broken puppet. "Yes," the words scraped out. Barely audible. I cleared my throat, tried again, forcing false warmth into my voice. "Yes, it has been too long. I remember." The lie hung in the air between us, thin and fragile. Did he believe it? His expression remained unreadable for a long moment. Then the faintest hint of a smile touched his lips, tinged with something like melancholy understanding. "Good," he murmured, the sound strangely intimate. "I hoped you would." He leaned even closer, voice dropping. "Remember Rossi's, that little cafe down by the harbor? The one with the faded green awning? Terrible coffee, great view." He paused, eyes searching mine. "We spent hours there, talking, especially after things went south for you." My mind was a frantic blank, scrabbling for purchase. Rossi's? Green awning? Harbor? It meant nothing. Yet, there was a phantom scent of salt spray, the feel of damp wool, the low cry of a distant foghorn teasing the edges of my consciousness. Were these his memories, bleeding into mine, or my own buried guilt projecting onto his words? The line blurred, terrifyingly. "Yeah," I forced myself to say, trying for a casual nod. My heart hammered against my ribs. "The coffee. Yeah, it was bad," I added, desperately trying to sound convincing. "But the rain that night was worse. A gamble," he chuckled, a dry, rustling sound. "You were soaked through, came in looking like something the cat dragged in." His smile faded slightly. "But we talked. You needed to talk. About Sarah. About the money." My blood froze. Sarah. How could he know her name? My carefully constructed wall of denial crumbled. The lie felt transparent now. He knew. He had to know I didn't remember. That this was all a charade. Panic clawed at my throat. But his expression remained calm, almost sympathetic. He reached into his trench coat pocket. "You were in a bad way," he continued softly, pulling out the small tarnished silver locket I'd seen in my near hallucination before. It swung gently from its chain in the dim light. "You asked me to hold on to this for you. Say you couldn't trust yourself with it then." He held it out slightly, not offering it, just displaying it. "For safekeeping, you said." I stared at the locket, mesmerized, horrified. It looked old, intricate. Did it belong to Sarah? Was this some relic from the wreckage I'd caused? The urge to snatch it, to deny it, was overpowering. But Rule 3. Lie. "Safekeeping," I echoed numbly, my voice barely a whisper. The air felt thick, hard to draw into my lungs. I felt stripped bare, my carefully buried past, dragged into the sickly light of this cursed place. He nodded slowly, his pale eyes seeming to soften with pity, which was somehow worse than malice. "I've kept my promise, Alex." He tucked the locket away again. The faint smell of rain and something metallic, like the locket itself, lingered in the air. "Well," he straightened up, the moment of strange intimacy dissolving. "Duty calls. The Concord waits." He gave a curt nod, a gesture of finality. "Try to stay out of trouble this time, eh?" He turned and walked, not towards platform 3, but back towards the shadowed corridor he'd emerged from. His footsteps were silent again. Just before he reached the darkness, he paused and glanced back, his face half hidden in shadow. "She still asks about you, you know," he murmured, the words carrying clearly across the space. Then he stepped into the shadows and was gone. She? Sarah? Or someone else? The ambiguity was another twist of the knife. I stood there, leaning heavily against the counter, shaking uncontrollably. The encounter felt like a violation far deeper than the other two. It hadn't just threatened me physically. It had peeled back layers, exposed raw nerves, used my own guilt against me. Was he real? Was any of this real? Or was the station itself projecting my deepest fears, my most profound regrets, giving them form? The silence returned. But it wasn't empty anymore. It was filled with whispers of the past, with the weight of unspoken names, with the cold certainty of judgment. Then, cutting through the suffocating quiet. It came, faint at first, then growing louder, clearer. A low, mournful sound that vibrated deep within the earth, echoing through the vast hall, resonating in my very soul. The whistle of the Midnight Concord. It was close now, very close. That whistle. It wasn't just sound. It was a physical force, a mournful cry that resonated deep in the station's iron bones and deeper still in mine. It ripped through the fragile silence left by the man in the trench coat, erasing the phantom scent of rain and salt, replacing it with the certainty of imminent horror. The Midnight Concord was no longer distant. It was here. Almost. The station responded instantly, violently. The floor beneath my feet didn't just vibrate. It trembled, sending shivers up my legs. Dust erupted from the high ceiling, raining down in choking clouds. The lights went berserk, no longer just flickering, but strobing violently between blinding flashes and pitch darkness. The sickly green glow from the platform, 3 tunnel, pulsing in the black moments, like a diseased heartbeat. The air became a battleground. Freezing gusts, carrying the scent of grave dirt and lilies, warred with waves of suffocating heat that smelled of burning insulation and something vaguely like roasting meat. My senses overloaded, vision swimming, nausea clawing its way up my throat. The sounds escalated into a maddening cacophony. The PA system wasn't whispering anymore. It was shrieking. A high-pitched electronic scream layered with distorted voices chanting fragments. Remember, no eyes. Backwards all aboard. Scraping sounds multiplied, echoing from the platforms, from the walls, a restless, frantic energy building. Panic was a physical entity clawing inside my chest. My carefully constructed attempts at rationalization, at finding links to my past guilt, dissolved into raw animal terror. There was no meaning here, no judgment, just consumption. This place, this train, they didn't care why I was here. They just were, and they were hungry. I slammed my body against the booth door, checking the bolt again by touch in the strobing darkness. Useless. My eyes darted to the monitors, trying to make sense of the glitching, strobing images. A flash of movement on platform 3, gaunt shapes gathering near the tunnel mouth, silhouetted against the pulsing green. A blast of static on another screen, resolving for a split second into wide, dark, unblinking eyes staring directly into the camera before dissolving again. The pressure in the air was immense, squeezing my lungs, making my ears ache. The faceless was near. The cold deepened momentarily. The walker. Were they all converging? My gaze locked onto the monitor showing platform 3. The green light pouring from the tunnel was brighter now, casting long, distorted shadows from the waiting figures. It wasn't just light. It felt like a tangible presence, thick and corrupting. The roar began to build, no longer just a whistle, but a deep, grinding thunder that vibrated in my teeth, shaking the very foundations of the station. Metal shrieked against metal, tortured, agonized, and woven into it, clearer now, was the sound of voices, thousands of them, whispering, moaning, screaming, in a discordant chorus that threatened to shatter my sanity. The train was bursting from the tunnel. The roar became deafening. The booth shook violently. The strobing lights went into overdrive. There, on the screen, bathed in ghastly green light, the engine. Ancient, impossible, a behemoth of weeping. Rusted metal fused with glistening black organic matter that pulsed faintly. And the headlight, that single vast milky white eye, swiveling slowly, its dead gaze sweeping across the platform, fixing on the station, fixing on my booth. It saw me. The engine of the Midnight Concord ground onto platform 3 with a shriek that ripped through the station's chaos. The sound of worlds tearing. It was huge, monstrously so, dwarfing the platform, its pulsating black growths weeping viscous fluid onto the tracks. The single, dead white eye pulsed with nauseating green light, pinning me in its gaze. Car after identical car screeched behind it, scarred metal panels bulging, the darkness within seeming to press outwards. The air was thick with the stench of decay, hot oil, and something indescribably foul, like spoiled meat left in the sun, with a series of sickening cracks, like bones snapping. Jagged fissures tore open along the sides of the cars nearest the platform. Not doors, but wounds, gaping maws of absolute blackness that pulsed in time with the engine's eye. Where ye? A blast of freezing air, carrying faint whispers and moans, billowed out. The figures on the platform moved. The gaunt shadows glided towards the openings, their movements unnervingly fluid. The faceless entity I denied simply merged with the darkness inside one fissure, dissolving instantly. The backwards walker, its form still blurred and indistinct even under the harsh green light, stood frozen for a moment, then turned, its movements stiff but deliberate, and walked forwards into the train. My stomach lurched. The man in the trench coat stood impassively near the engine, watching. He wasn't boarding. He was waiting. His pale eyes flickered towards my booth again, a flicker of cold amusement in them. He knew. Then the closest fissure, directly opposite my booth, widened with a wet tearing sound. The blackness within felt focused, hungry. The dead eye of the engine pulsed faster. The low hum returned, vibrating through the floor, shaking the booth. They want me. Panic obliterated thought. I slammed the bolt back. It screeched in protest, just as something heavy slammed against the outside of the plexiglass window. A pale, multi-jointed hand, fingers like bleached twigs, pressed against the glass, leaving a greasy smear as it slid downwards. Another impact hit the door beside me, rattling the frame. No choice. I kicked the door outwards, shoving blindly, feeling a momentary resistance that gave way with a wet squelch. I burst out into the pandemonium of the main hall. The noise was a physical blow. The train's roar, the station's groans, the paa's high-pitched electronic scream. The green light strobed, casting everything in jerky, nightmarish flashes. My eyes darted towards the dark corridor leading to the station master's office. Away from the train, away from the light, I sprinted, slipping on something wet and slick on the floor. Behind me, a chorus of wet, sighing breaths rose, closer than before. The scraping, dragging sound echoed from the direction of the booth, faster now, pursuing. I didn't dare look back. The green light painted my fleeing shadow huge and monstrous before me. I reached the corridor, plunged into the relative darkness. Mildew, decay, damp stone. Emergency lights flickered weakly. Ahead, shuffling. Ahead, shuffling. The blank-eyed man from earlier, still shambling mindlessly towards the train's siren call. I shoved past him roughly, ignoring the vacant stare, ignoring the way his skin felt cold and clammy. Deeper into the corridor, it twisted, the air growing thick, heavy. Water dripped somewhere. Then, the steel door, maintenance access. Hope, thin and desperate, flared. Down, away, anywhere but here. I grabbed the rusted wheel latch, throwing my weight against it. It resisted, groaning. Behind me, echoing in the narrow space, the wet sighing, the scraping drag. Right behind me, panic gave me inhuman strength. I heaved again. The wheel screeched, turned, almost there. A cold, damp touch brushed my neck. I screamed, recoiling, stumbling forward. As the wheel finally gave way, I yanked the heavy steel door open, revealing not stairs, but a sheer drop into pitch blackness. A void that reeked powerfully of disturbed earth and something infinitely older, colder. No time, I threw myself through the opening as something wet and heavy slammed into the doorframe, right where I'd been. I landed hard on unseen ground, scrambling away from the opening, pulling the immense weight of the door shut with a deafening clang that echoed into the void. Darkness. Absolute consuming blackness. My fingers scrabbled against the cold steel, found the heavy sliding bar on the inside. With the last of my strength, I slammed it home into its bracket. Silence. Complete. The sudden absence of the train's roar, the station's screams, was as shocking as the noise had been. Only my own ragged gasping, the frantic pounding of my heart, and the thick, cold smell of the grave. I pressed my back against the door, trembling violently in the dark, listening to the silence on the other side. Safe, or just trapped in a different kind of hell. The darkness behind the steel door was absolute. A smothering blanket that pressed in after the cacophony of the climax. Silence reigned, but it felt different from the other silence. This was merely the absence of noise, not an active, listening void. The air was thick with the smell of damp earth, mildew, and something colder, stonier. I leaned against the heavy door, my body shaking uncontrollably, listening. No pursuit sounds, no wet sighs or scraping drags, no grinding roar of the departing train. Had it gone? Had I actually escaped? My fingers fumbled in my pocket, closing around the cool, dense shape of the gray stone. It felt neutral now, its unnatural coldness less pronounced away from the immediate presence of the entities. My other hand found my phone. Screen cracked, but the flashlight function miraculously worked, casting a weak, trembling beam into the oppressive blackness. I was in some kind of service tunnel. Rough-hewn rock walls glistened with moisture. Pipes snaked overhead, coated in rust and cobwebs. The floor was uneven dirt and gravel. The air was freezing, the smell of decay pervasive. I pushed myself off the door, every muscle screaming in protest, cuts stinging. Using the wall for support, I started moving, flashlight beam dancing nervously ahead. The tunnel twisted, sloped downward slightly. Water dripped rhythmically somewhere in the darkness, each drop echoing unnervingly. Every few yards, alcoves were carved into the rock, some empty, others containing piles of debris, rusted tools, rotted sacks, broken lanterns that looked ancient. In one alcove, I found a pile of old moth-eaten uniforms, vaguely similar to the one Henderson had issued me, but of a much older cut. Beneath them, half buried in the dirt, bones, small ones, maybe animal, or maybe not. I backed away quickly, bile rising in my throat. Further on, the beam caught scratches on the wall. Tally marks, hundreds of them, far more than under the counter upstairs. And words, gouged frantically into the stone. Don't sleep, it sees in the dark. The train isn't the worst part. Henderson lies. Henderson lies. My blood ran cold. What did that mean? The cryptic notes only deepened the mystery. The sense of being trapped in a cycle far older and more complex than I could fathom. The tunnel branched. One way sloped further down into blackness, the earthy smell intensifying. The other seemed to lead upwards, a faint draft carrying the distant hum of electricity, up towards the station. Hiding down here felt safer, but the thought of being trapped underground indefinitely was horrifying. Maybe the train was gone. Maybe the night was over. I chose the upward path. It wound around, eventually leading to a rusted spiral staircase. Climbing it, each metal step groaning under my weight, I felt exposed, vulnerable. Was something listening? Waiting above. The staircase ended at another heavy steel door, this one unlocked. Taking a deep breath, flashlight held like a weapon. I pushed it open slowly. I emerged into the back corridor near the station master's office. The same corridor the man in the trench coat had used. The main station lights were on, flickering slightly but stable. The horrible sounds were gone. Only the low hum of the building remained. And silence. But it felt like the normal silence of an empty building in the dead of night, not the predatory stillness from before. Cautiously, I moved towards the main hall. It was deserted, empty benches, grimy floor, shadows pooling in the corners. The platform 3 archway looked dark, inert, no green glow, no pulsing organic matter. Had I imagined it all? Was it just a stress-induced nightmare? But the cuts on my arms were real. The torn uniform was real. The heavy, cold gray stone in my pocket was real. And the memory of that blank face, that dead white eye, was seared into my mind. Gray light was beginning to filter through the high, dirty windows. Dawn. Had I survived the night? Then I saw him, standing near the main entrance. Silhouetted against the pale morning light was Henderson. He wasn't looking out, but in, towards me. He held a steaming styrofoam cup of coffee, and he wasn't vibrating with nervous energy anymore. His face was calm, weary, resigned. And he didn't look surprised to see me emerge, battered and filthy, from the station's shadow depths. He looked like he'd been waiting. "Rough night, Alex?" Henderson asked, his voice quiet, devoid of the frantic edge I remembered. He took a slow sip of coffee, his eyes, no longer darting, but steady and old, assessing me over the rim of the cup. I didn't answer immediately, just stood there, swaying slightly, trying to reconcile this calm figure with the terrified man who'd hired me. The pieces clicked into place with sickening certainty. The notes in the tunnel. Henderson lies. He hadn't just been scared of the station. He was scared of leaving it. Scared of whatever happened if the handover didn't go smoothly. The train, I finally managed, my voice hoarse. The passengers. "What is this place, Henderson?" He sighed. A long, weary sound. He gestured vaguely towards a bench. "Might as well sit. It's almost shift change." We sat in silence for a moment, the vast emptiness of the station seeming to listen. The rising sun cast long, dusty beams through the grimy windows. "St. Jude's isn't just a stop on the line," Henderson began, staring into his coffee cup. "It's more like customs, a transfer point. Not for people, not usually. For other things. Things that travel on the Concord. Souls," I whispered, remembering the man in the trench coat mentioning others. Henderson shrugged. "Maybe. Fragments. Echoes. Things from outside. Things that don't belong in the normal world. The Concord collects them. Takes them where they need to go. Or maybe it just takes them away. Who knows? All I know is this place is the gate. And it needs a gatekeeper. An attendant," I said numbly. "An attendant," he agreed. "Someone to punch the tickets for the few human strays who wander in. Someone to observe. Someone to manage the interference. The rules," I breathed. "The rules," he confirmed. "They keep things orderly. Mostly. Keep the attendant from getting involved. Keep the passengers flowing. Break the rules. Interfere too much. You draw attention. The wrong kind." He looked at me then, his eyes filled with a profound exhaustion. "The faceless, they're already ticketed, see? Trying to stop them is pointless. The backwards walkers, looking at them acknowledges their twisted state, gives them purchase. And the remember me types." He trailed off, shaking his head. "They feed on connection, on memory, real or stolen. Lying starves them, keeps them moving along. And the station itself?" I asked, thinking of the whispers, the shifting shadows, the feeling of being watched by the building. It's old, older than the tracks, older than the town. It has needs, habits. The attendant learns them. He took another sip. Why me, Henderson? Why did you pick me? He looked at me directly, and I saw the same haunted emptiness I now felt reflected in my own soul. You were running, he said simply. You were hurting. You carried guilt like luggage. People like that, they're sensitive to this place. They hear the whispers easier. And, his voice dropped, they have less to lose. Less to go back to. Makes them suitable, expendable. He didn't have to say it. So what happens now? I asked, dread pooling cold and heavy in my stomach. So, I asked, dread pooling cold and heavy in my stomach. Wait, do I just leave? Henderson gave a short, humorless laugh. Leave? Alex, you survived the Concord's arrival after interacting with multiple passengers, after breaking the silence in the tunnels by escaping. You've seen the train, you know? The station knows you know. They know. He gestured vaguely towards the shadows. You're part of the timetable now. You don't just walk away. So I'm trapped. You have a choice, Henderson said, though his tone suggested otherwise. You can resist. Try to leave. Maybe you'll make it a few miles before something finds you. Or maybe you'll just become another permanent resident here, like Carson probably did. Another whisper on the PA. Another shadow flitting on the platform. He paused, letting the weight of it sink in. Or you accept the job, really accept it, learn the deeper rules, the rhythms of the place, keep the gate, punch the tickets, survive, until it's time to find your replacement. He finished his coffee, crumpling the cup. The rising sun illuminated the dust motes dancing in the air. Outside, the world was waking up. But in here, time felt frozen again, trapped in an endless night shift. I thought of Sarah, of the wreckage I'd left behind. There was no going back there, and apparently, no leaving here. My shoulders slumped. The fight, the terror, it had all drained away, leaving only a vast, hollow exhaustion. The deeper rules, I asked, my voice flat. Henderson nodded, a flicker of grim relief in his eyes. He reached into his worn jacket and pulled out another folded, stained piece of paper. Not the same one he gave me, but similar. Older. Rule 1, he began, his voice taking on a tired, instructional tone. Never let the coffee run dry after midnight. I didn't recoil this time. I just listened, the words washing over me, settling into the hollow spaces inside. I looked around the vast, empty station. My cage, my penance, my eternity. The silence felt different now. Not empty, not predatory, just waiting. I saw my reflection ghosted in the dirty plexiglass of the ticket booth. The face staring back was pale, exhausted, lines etched around the eyes that hadn't been there before. They looked like Henderson's eyes. They looked like Brody's eyes from that other life I almost lived. The distant sound echoed faintly through the station. Impossibly early, or perhaps right on time. A low, mournful whistle, vibrating deep in the stone. The Midnight Concord. It would be back tonight. I stood up, smoothed down my torn, filthy uniform, walked towards the booth. Time to get ready. The passengers would be arriving soon.